Thanks again for doing this for us. Nine, are you with me?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
So we're going to start off, if you don't mind, on the death towers. You are an OSP engineer working on these cancer towers, a.k.a. cell phone or Gwen towers, and they also have a term called Cancer Alley, right?
Yes.
Okay, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Well, I do a number of duties for the communications industry. I install, replace, repair, and test the antenna systems on top of the towers, and sometimes do a little bit of adjustments down below in the electronic shacks.
Okay, and are there any warnings on the outside of these towers that you work on?
Yes. If I'd been a little more prepared, I have all kinds of pictures from the signs that show radiation, give the warnings, and say that it's not safe for humans to enter. And primarily, that's just speaking of the area right there on the ground within the fence. But the real danger is what's coming off the top of the towers.
And that's what you work on?
Yes.
Okay, and what protective gear do they give you to protect you from this radiation that you're enduring?
They don't furnish any gear for us at all. Anything that the tools and the harness and the hard hats and all that is my own. Like,
yeah, but that's not protective gear. That's just to make sure you don't fall off the thing.
Yeah, it's claimed to be the most dangerous job in the United States.
Have you ever known anyone to die?
Yeah, several people.
From falling off of them, or from getting cancer?
Falling. Most of them don't make it long enough, I don't think, for the cancer to incubate and become active. There's a lot of cancer episodes among some of the guys that have been around the industry for a while.
How do you lease a spot on a tower?
Well, like your local police department, fire department, or your phone company, your cable TV company, anybody that needs to get a microwave transmitter high up in the air to shoot a signal to the next receiver can go to somebody who owns a tower and say, I'd like to rent a spot on that tower from you. And they'll say, fine. They draw up the lease agreement. He goes up there and hangs his piece of equipment, runs a little piece of cable or whatever to the ground to hook it up, and it's his show. The people with the towers, the people in the tower business, generally are not in the communication business. They only buy property, build towers, and then lease those towers out to whoever, U.S. Cellular, Verizon, Windstream, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of equipment on just about every one of these towers that is not for cell phones, too, if that's good.
Right, okay. I want you to tell everyone about the FCC altering documents of radiation results.
Well, the FCC wasn't so much responsible as the contractors hired to do the work. And rather than to set the equipment up properly, they have logs that need to be turned in, and these logs are generated from their meters, where the picture is stored of the wavelength, and the meter downloads to a computer or desktop. And these logs have to be accurate for the location and time that it says on there. But many of the guys alter the documentation, send it in anyway.
And why do they do this?
Inexperience primarily. The guys did not know how to set the equipment up properly, or they didn't know how to correct the components in the electronics that were creating a malfunction. So
why would they hire someone that didn't know what they were doing?
Well, if you stumble across a job like this and you have an opportunity to step into a contract that's going to gross $15 million a year, or maybe be 20 guys on the job site, then you want to get 20 of them on the job site, whether you have the experience hands or not. And I tell you right now, there is such a deficit in experienced hands that there's no way that all the jobs can be filled with experienced people right now. They've got to put what they can in there now because they're wanting the bottom line. They want the revenue.
Are these towers endangering our lives?
Definitely. And what's worse than some of the towers is when we mount these transmitters on the corner of your buildings. We've got them mounted on hospitals. We've got them mounted on apartment buildings. We've got them mounted on banks. we got them mounted all over, especially in these more densely populated cities. And those towers, those transmitters, they're on buildings. You can just about guarantee there are people working in other offices or apartments in direct line of that transmitter. And that's where they're creating what the industry calls cancer alleys.
Right. You told me that some of the men that you had worked with could taste their fillings.
Reported to me. I've never had it myself, but these antennas are on top of the towers. They say to stay away from them. I think it's like stay away from 2 feet from the back of it while it's energized, and they don't want you in the front of it at all. But I tell you, we don't shut them down to work on them, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done off the side and sometimes near the front of them. And I've had a couple guys tell me that they felt they tasted foil in their mouth while they were in the front of it, you know.
What kind of contract did they write you up to agree to this job? There a disclaimer, like that they're not responsible for anything that happens to you? Or?
No, it's passed on down to each individual contract signed. But
okay.
If it ever came into court, and this has been the same throughout my life in several different industries. I've been a contractor and subcontractor all my life, but in every industry, it comes down to the same thing: that if there is an injury, then the work-related injury or illness is passed back up through court, back up to the prime contractor, and right into the customer's lap, and then the jury decides what percentage of responsibility each one of the people involved in this incident are responsible for.
Right. You're admitting that these are leaking radiation, and the FCC or whoever is contracted by them is altering the documents and altering the results of the radiation that's coming from them. So if we can't even trust them, why would we have them next to schools and churches and stuff?
Well, I can only tell you that they have large slurry ponds from coal mines resting on small hilltops directly above schoolhouses, and these slurry ponds are breaking their dams probably yearly. So I don't know why they would put that slurry pond above a schoolhouse of elementary aged children, and I don't know why they would want these towers anywhere near a school.
Can you just basically give everyone a description or definition of what a death tower is?
Well, a lot of the towers out there have antennas, transmitters up there that are doing a lot more than carrying your cell phone signals. And you know, they radiate harmful radiation to passive citizens, let alone the towers that are designed to control crowds in a non-lethal defense system.
Right. You said it's a ground weapon defense system. Can you elaborate on that?
It has been extensive since probably about 2005. But primarily it was all up and down the East Coast, particularly around D.C., Richmond, the hot spots in Virginia, where it's more than mind control. It's a physical body control. Some people call them heat, and they can render a body completely incapacitated through these frequency transmissions. They'll turn them on, and people become completely disoriented, vertigo, nauseous, lose all control of their body functions, and you collapse to the ground, and you remain there until the signal's shut off.
Right. So do you think they're setting these up, preparing for something, like in case they may need to use them on us?
Yeah, that's exactly why they're put there. I mean,
right, that's really scary.
Another type of defense there that at a lower level transmission, it will cause like a hissing or a vibration or a hum, and no matter where you are, this sensation will seemingly be coming from directly behind your head, and the disorientation, the fear, it will stop anybody from any activity they might be up to, and it will take the wind out of your sail if you're there to obstruct justice or put up a fight. And I do know some people I work with who suffer extreme condition of vertigo and taste in their mouth, ears ringing, stuff like that. I don't know if they were more susceptible to it or if they just have been exposed to a higher degree. I'm not sure, but for the most part, you work through it. You get there, you get your job done, and get out of there as soon as you can.
Right. Now, the FCC regulates these towers. What's to keep them from falsifying documentation or to keep other people from falsifying the documentation of the radiation levels that they give to the FCC? Is there a checks and balances system in this?
Yeah, there's supposed to, according, if you looked at it on paper, it would look like there's a check and balance system. But unless they're there at the same time someone is falsifying documentation, it's awful hard to prove that this technician didn't actually leave the site with everything performing properly and then something changed after he left. So
right.
it's almost impossible to prove any falsification of documentation.
Have you ever known anyone to falsify documents to hand to the FCC?
On several accounts, not particularly on the towers, but on some telephony broadband systems in situation of radiation leakage and stuff like that, yeah. These tower locations generally do not have their actual physical address. The physical address is going to be a mile or two away from where the tower site actually is, and I don't understand the discrepancies there, whether it's just to protect the tower sites or whatever, I'm not sure, but
right.
You just have to go to the FCC, find out what proof of performance testing's been turned in, and what the leakage was, and I'm sure it's all going to be up to par there. About the only way to do it is for the public to put together some of their own little crews with some test equipment and start going into some of these sites, measuring the leakage themselves.
Right, and you said we can get something like that at Radio Shack or like on the internet, right?
Yeah. And they're not going to give you a some of these frequency counters will only tell you what wavelengths are being transmitted where at on the spectrum, but to measure your radiation leakage, there's CLI testers, they call them, and those will give you the amount of radiation that's being leaked. And cable TV, phone company, any of these type of supply companies will have those meters available.
Do you feel like these towers are safe for the American people? And this is an opinionated question.
For several different reasons, they definitely are not safe. Okay. Yeah, I mean they're physical hazards. They're falling down. They're structurally not designed to be carrying the amount of weight that we're eventually putting up there. A lot of these things are older towers, and they weren't designed to have all this weight on them. Just the fact of age and corrosion is bringing some of them down. There's probably, I don't know, I'm guessing right now, but there's probably at least one every day catching on fire. And no, they're not safe. And that's not even to mention the radiation that's being transmitted from these towers. And many of the times these transmitters up there, they call them antennas, but they're transmitters. They have to be pointed in specific directions at specific angles, and many times you'll go up there and see that they're pointed down toward the ground. They're pointed in areas that they're not even supposed to be generating their signals.
Right, so they could be pointed down at, like, the basketball court where the children are playing for some reason? I mean, is that possible?
Could be. Yeah. And when we see that transmitter, when we see that antenna, it looks like maybe 8 foot tall by maybe 14 to 16 inches wide, and it's smooth, covered. But that's just the cover. The transmitters are inside that, and it's hard to tell if they're mounted correctly in there, or if they're pointed down, or whatever. You know, I mean, this is something that's really too dangerous just to assume that everything's been put together correctly.
Right, and you said that anyone can lease a spot on the tower.
There'll be generally the cell phone up there will be 3 antennas on 3 sides of the tower, and they're about 8 foot tall, 1.5 feet wide, and the ones that are smaller than that, the ones that are round, these are not cell phone transmitters, and generally, I mean, they're all not healthy. They're all destructive to anything that's living. Maybe they just don't want us to be able to go down to the FCC or to the local courthouse and draw up the exact coordinates of these towers either. I don't know, but very seldom does the address match the physical location of the tower site.
Right. Nine, you had some people threaten you, didn't you, after you reported them about falsifying the documents, right?
Yeah, and nearly destroyed my career. I mean, it put me on the run for several years. I mean, I had a group of 4 people that were chasing me from one ocean to the other, and kept showing up on job sites, pretending to be federal marshals, and it was crazy. It was crazy, and it was all because of some of these techs that were falsifying documentation on a particular job, and they were busted.
Right.
And,
well, at least you were doing the right thing. I want to ask you if you feel any effects from the towers after years of working on them.
Who knows what could be incubating? I mean, I feel fine, and
right.
But I know some of the other people I've worked with aren't doing so well.
Wait, how many people have died from like accidents on the towers?
Well, just since January, I think there's probably been maybe 12 to 14.
And they're all from falling? They're from falling off of them? That's so horrible.
Yeah, and you know, and there's not that many of us out there. So I mean, 12 to 14 in 7 or 8 months may not seem like a lot, but it is. There's quite a few, and most of these guys are young. Most of them have families and young children, and
yeah, it's really sad.
I exposed those guys that were falsifying the documentation to the FCC, and so a lot of his people were terminated. One of them ended up doing federal time. He had been arrested before under the same pretenses of falsifying his documentation to the FCC. It wasn't a long time, but they sentenced him to a few years in federal prison. And so the owners of the company turned the table on me, and I thought they would be happy for me, because we don't want these guys out here working in the field that aren't doing things proper. So when I exposed them, I thought this would be a chance for me to move up the ladder and acquire a little more responsibility and income. But
instead of the opposite, yeah.
Yeah.
Exposing the bad guys usually doesn't help you move up in a job, especially if you're working for them.
Yeah, I understand that too. I was naive enough to think that we all had the same interest. But for a lot of people out there, it's the financial gain, and that's all they're worried about.
Yeah.
Not your children, it's not my children, it's probably not even their own children. Pardon me, Madison, I would like to tell everybody that if you live anywhere around the bottom of these towers, especially those ones they call a monopole, that is just a round tower, and it looks like a telescope sitting on the ground upside down, they're experiencing a lot of structural integrity problems with these, because we're overloading them. These towers were built for a lot less weight than what we're putting up there right now, but we continue to put more and more transmitters up there, and these towers are falling over. They're catching on fire. There's all kinds of things going down with these towers because they're not designed to hold the weight that we're putting up there. So if you've got any of these in your backyard, look at them close. They may have these big straps of steel bolted to the sides of this thing going all up and down there, and it looks like a real thatch job. Well, that's what's wrong. That tower was weak, and they've gone in there, and they tried to Band-Aid it up.
Thank you for calling Crown Castle's Network Operations Center. Calls may be monitored for training purposes. Please hold for the next available operator.
Network Operations, this is Chris.
My name is Amanda. I live in Virginia Beach, and I actually recently visited your Lynn Haven Road. I'm really not sure what kind of tower it is, but I just wanted to know if I could get a little bit of information as to what the tower is even for.
Crown Castle is the company that owns it. We're a cell phone tower provider. We erect the cell phone towers. Various carriers come in, some broadcast companies, mostly cell phone services, and they put their services on the tower and basically just lease the space on the tower.
Who could I go to get information as far as like radiation readings on the tower, or what operator equipment or antennas, transmitters are actually on the tower? I know a lot of towers have different stuff on them. Some may be for cell phones. Then you'll see some with like microwave dishes on them. Then others kind of just look like antennas. How would I find out the information on what the towers are even for?
What you could do is, for the most part, the radio frequency or RF limits are well within or below. They're nothing to worry about. But if I can't give you an exact number on those because I'm not really sure what tower you're at.
Do you have like a website that I can go to and do the research myself?
All that information could be obtained from our help desk or our landlord hotline. I wouldn't have any of that information, unfortunately, but I can get you somewhere, and that is the landlord helpline. And if they can't answer it, they will definitely find something or someone that can, but that's where you're going to want to start right there.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. You have a good day.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Crown Castle USA. What can you tell me about them?
Well, I think they're probably one of the oldest, definitely one of the largest tower site owners in the nation.
Crown Castle is so secretive on giving proprietary information out.
That'd be the information on their customers, the people who lease the space from them.
Citizens are not going to be allowed to find out who is leasing the space on the tower?
We could through public information at the local courthouses. It's all documented down there. They're not going to help you find the information, but you're allowed to go into the records and search for yourself.
Okay, so where will we do that exactly?
At the courthouse, right along with any other building permits. They have to have topography maps there, and they also have to show the field of penetration.
Okay, well, the Crown Castle man told me today that all of their employees have to wear protective gear going up on the towers. What is your company's policy on that?
We're not company people. We're contractors, so that gives us a little bit of freedom.
Okay, but who are you contracted by?
It would be the proprietary owners. Yeah.
Okay, so you work for one of the bad guys, right?
Yes, yeah.
Is the stuff that you're working on all cell phone related?
No, there's plenty of equipment up there that's not cell related.
Right. Do you know what it is? What it's for?
On many towers, it's WIN transmitters. They call it the ground wave emergency network. There's a lot that people aren't aware of, how these towers are manipulating a false electromagnetic field surrounding the Earth. They have a range of duties to perform from these tower sites.
Tower operator, is that your position?
Outside plant field engineer.
Do they tell you ahead of time, not to mess with other stuff that's on the tower, or that you have to remain quiet about certain things? Is there something that you sign that you can't tell anybody?
We like to refer only to the project at hand. We try not to talk too much about other equipment up there. It's none of our business.
Well, what would happen if you were to blow the whistle on them, legally?
I would definitely be blackballed, and I'd probably have a hard time finding work the rest of my life.
Right, well, that would be a good thing, considering your job.
They create a false magnetic floor on the Earth. The Earth pulsates with a natural approximately 8 kilohertz, I think, when this electromagnetic pulse comes from the south, moving over the Earth to the north. It's just like a heartbeat almost. And this thing operates on the same frequency that part of our brain does, presenting a false floor. It disconnects us from natural intuition and abilities. WIN system, the towers are set up anywhere from 299 being the minimum to 500 maximum foot high on the transmitters. Something that a lot of people aren't aware of is at the base of these WIN towers, there is 300-foot strands of copper spreading out from the base underground in a spoke-like fashion. So it's in your basement. It's everywhere. This magnetic floor, this false magnetic floor that keeps us from walking in harmony.
Okay, so we already know that we're not going to be able to get public information on people putting this stuff up there. What responsibility does Crown have to the equipment that's on it? Are they responsible for the radiation that comes off of it, or is it the carrier?
Carriers, whoever their customers are responsible for testing and proof of performance and certification tests that need to be done annually. When the tests are done, the contractor that performs the tests, the customer who owns transmitters on the tower, and the FCC are all given copies of test results, and they're required to keep them for 5 years.
Well, they said they had a general population standard and a worker standard. What's the difference?
The general population would be anybody that's out around the tower, living near the towers. There's certain levels of radiation that these people are permitted to transmit through their yards and schoolyards and playgrounds, whereas the workers that are on the tower are exposed to quite a bit more.
How does one dummy up information to the FCC?
Well, you manipulate the software in your meters, maybe provide a false location or a location that did test accurately, and you would then use those pictures of those wavelengths underneath new locations and new dates. Very seldom is the physical address correspond with the geographical location of the towers. Usually it's within a mile to 2 miles off. A CLI meter will measure the levels of radiation. I suggested a frequency counter. It's a cheap way to go, but it will tell you if there is open circuits transmitting, and it will tell you what frequency that the transmissions are on. You can use a frequency counter, and it will tell you what frequency is open and transmitting. There's a terahertz wavelength that will split the double helix of our DNA. And these cell phones and the scanners at the airports from TSA, these all have terahertz similar frequency transmitted that's causing more damage than we will ever know.
Tinnitus. You know, everyone getting the ringing in their ears. Is that due to the towers?
Well, it's one of the first symptoms, I think, exposure to radiation, depending on the frequency. But it is one of the first symptoms that people experience. It's tinnitus and headaches and nausea and lethargic, fatigue.
How many years have you been doing this?
I've been in the telecommunications industry since the mid-'80s.
And how long have you been climbing towers, like these particular towers?
I started my first tower in 1985. The Gwen transmitters have many different functions, including controlling the weather, mind behavior, mood control, and they send a synthetic telepathy as infrasound to those victims of the U.S. government's mind control implants. These work in conjunction with HARP and the Russian woodpecker transmitter, similar to HARP. You can tailor-make your own weather. We've got to get to the FCC and your local courthouses, get the maps, find out where the towers are, find out if you're in the paths, in the direct paths. We're all being saturated with these with this radiation. People that are in the direct path are the ones that are at the most exposure and have the most to lose and in danger of physical ailment. The major floods in 1993 were manipulated through the HARP and Gwen systems. The Gwen towers at the northern perimeter of the Mississippi and the Missouri rivers. There's these invisible rivers that flow through our atmosphere, almost 2 miles up from the surface of the earth, and it's water vapor. Huge, huge amounts of water traveling north with this electromagnetic field. They turn these Gwen towers on for 40 days and 40 nights, mocking the Genesis story in the Bible.
Right.
And what they did was they dammed up the flow of water vapor traveling north till it dropped right on the Midwest.